Welcome to Photographiliac Podcast. I'm your host, B. Smitty. And today's episode is actually a bit interesting because it's somewhat about a lack of photography. And the story is crazy for sure. And I hope you've noticed the sound of this podcast episode. It's going to be a lot better. It's not going to be as, I guess the best way to explain it is cheap sounding. But at the same time, the microphone I used for years now, I loved it. Yeah, I mean, it's just simple, to the point. You know, it was just a microphone that recorded it, and it got the job done. But it was time to upgrade. It's time to get the sound, the sound, qualities up and have it professional. And I've always been a fan of Rode microphones. When I first started a podcast about 5 years ago, or actually maybe more than 5 years ago, when my very first podcast was called Quest of the Art Life, I had a Rode setup, and then basically kind of sold some things and had to make some things happen back then. And then I just never got back into the full swing of professional equipment with podcasting, even though I've been running this podcast now for a couple years, Photographiliac. So I got to look to see when the actual anniversary of this podcast is, because it's probably coming up. So we'll have to do a special episode on that. And yeah, so I hope the sound is much better, especially with like the S's and whatnot. Should sound way, way better. I think that's where you would notice kind of the lower quality aspect of the microphone I was using before. So hopefully I have the settings going pretty well for here. This is the first one I'm doing here. So if there's anything I need to tweak, I'll for sure do that in the next episode. So let's get into this one. We're going to go back to 2013, and we're going to talk about the night of February 28th. And this is only a month after Jeffrey Bush moved into this house. He was 36 years old. He was sleeping in his bed. It's around 11:30 at night, and was sucked into the earth due to a sinkhole that opened up 20 feet wide. The thunderous crash alerted his brother Jeremy, who ran into the room to see nothing but a hole. The bed and his brother were lost into the earth. And Jeremy jumped into the part of the hole, digging and swiping at the dirt, and the plumbing was sticking out of the parts of the dirt around him, and he couldn't find his brother, unfortunately. And the sheriff, who arrived minutes after, pulled Jeremy out. They could not see any traces of his brother Jeffrey. They had to run from the scene due to crumbling ground that was surrounding him. His brother Jeffrey, who vanished into the earth, was never seen again. Engineers ended up lowering a microphone into the hole to try to pick up signs of Jeffrey, but a second collapse sucked the equipment into the earth. It was determined more collapses may happen, so they decided to rescue, or a recovery would be too dangerous, and was called off. And I mentioned about the lack of photography. I mean, doing research on this episode, actually when I thought of doing this story, because I think about this story often, and just how crazy it is to be sucked into the earth, that there's really no photography like to be found. Like there's some photos of the house and that type of thing. There's a random crude video that was in the news. This is super low quality, just kind of not filmed well, and that's all you really see. And you would think something like this, you'd want some proper photographic evidence just to really look back at the scene and really, maybe break things down and, maybe learn something off of it. It was very interesting. And maybe they do exist. Maybe they're, some, officials have the photos and it's never been published. That could be the case. But I mean, going through like news articles and stuff, you would think there'd be something, some type of high quality photography, even if it's just one of the location. And just, yeah, there's nothing. Very interesting. But like I said, it could exist and could be like confidential, who knows. But yeah, lack of photography for sure. But obviously, I'm still going to add some content. There's, photos of the location and stuff like that. I'll post it on the website. Definitely check out bsmitty.com. There's a blog right in the front page, and I added a blog post to this podcast to be a good companion piece to the episodes. I should have said it up front. It's something new I'm doing with these episodes, and I actually want to do that with past episodes, and I'll mention that as time goes on as well. So I'm always trying to work on the podcast and make things better as I'm going. So again, bsmitty.com, nice companion piece to this episode. So you might be wondering, was he just buried from, couldn't see him because of the rubble? Like where did he end up? Well, county officials believe the body of Jeffrey Bush had been sucked into the water table beneath the ground surface. It could later flush out into the nearby Alafia River. But environmental scientist Philip Van Baenen, who studies sinkholes, believed it was more likely that Jeffrey Bush's body sunk into a 60-foot tall water-filled void between the sinkhole and the bedrock and is trapped in sediment. And just thinking about that whole situation, just going into the earth, like how terrible that would have been, just who knows, that's the thing. They don't really know, he's just vanished into the earth. And the house that happened at was demolished, and the hole was filled with 4 truckloads of gravel. And what's crazy, the story doesn't end there. So unfortunately, the body was never recovered. They called off the recovery. They, filled in the hole, and it was 2 years later, on August 19th, 2015, at 9:30 a.m., at the exact same location, a hole opened up around 20 feet wide. Pretty much the same exact thing happened. Luckily, there was no house there. They demolished it, and it was fenced off. But they didn't evacuate the locals. They just went back and refilled it. So will that hole ever open back up? I guess we'll find out. Nothing happened as in recovery. Nothing was ever, most likely it was, that scientists probably was right, but who really knows? And yeah, that's just a shocking story of, pure bad luck. You only lived there for a month or so and happened to be at that exact spot. It literally just like sucked his bed and him into the earth. It was like just half of his bedroom basically. And yeah, just these perfectly terrible timed things for it to happen to Jeffrey Bush there. So yeah, it's a story. And yeah, the lack of photography is very interesting in this one. But yeah, like I said, it could exist and we just, don't have access to it. And there's an aerial screenshot. Like, that's the thing. There's some screenshots. But again, it's just, just crude imagery at the same time. This is, we're looking at 2013 and then 2015. And you think, like, this is like a really random, dramatic event that should be documented even for like just forensic and historical purposes. And it just seems like, as far as I have come to find, that just doesn't exist. And yeah, so that is the story of Jeffrey Bush. Definitely a sad one. And I appreciate you checking out this podcast episode. We'll definitely dive into something a little bit more of a positive vibe in the next episode. And I want to thank you for listening. Follow over on Instagram at photographiliac pod. And if you'd like to listen to even more exclusive episodes, check out patreon.com/bsmitty. There's some great exclusive episodes there that you can only listen to on Patreon. And of course, if you're listening here on Apple, Spotify, wherever your audio programming is, make sure you hit that follow button so you can be notified when the next episode is live. And again, Instagram at photographiliac pod. That's where I actually post the announcement for the upcoming episodes. And the companion pieces over at bsmitty.com. Thank you very much for your support, and I will talk to you in the next episode.